third-degree burns, 2 broken ribs, concussion. So how do you feel?
Oh, terrible, Doctor. I just read an article of some guy about that even the classic Mega Drive Sonic games had severe flaws.
Terrible news. I'll see what I can do.
You know, Rog, with Lost World resembling Mario so much, and more Nintendo fans starting to show up in the fan base, maybe it's time we look at what makes Nintendo and Sega so different from each other. What do you say? Right. So we had this Nintendo and Sega war in the 90s, mostly ignited through the marketing strategies, but ignoring all the silliness about bits and what's cool or not. Let's look at what's fundamentally different about these two. To begin with, I recently read an article about a Nintendo fan who argued even the classic Sonic games were very badly programmed games, and we notice more and more that these games are under fire. Now, I won't go too in-depth about the article, but there was one argument that perfectly demonstrates the difference between the Sega state of mind and the Nintendo state of mind. So, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, for example. Everyone loves the power-ups, right? Awesome how Tails can fly Sonic up in the air, and those fantastic elemental shields. Sonic is all on fire and can speed up faster, or the electric shield that has all the rings fly towards Sonic and gives you a double jump. All Sonic fans love those power-ups and are always happy to see them return. All except this article that stated they're useless. Now, not entirely useless, they assist and empower Sonic a little. All of them have minor advantages, but the article stated none of them are ever vital. Sure, the bubble shield makes going underwater easier, but it's never really the difference between life and death, just a minor convenience. It's cool Sonic can speed up with the fire shield, or that it protects you against fire. But is there ever a part where you have to use the shield in order to get a power-up or get through a difficult part? Is there ever a moment in the game where losing the power-up makes you unable to go anywhere? Well, okay, there's the one boss fight that becomes ridiculously easy when you have the fire shield, and one section where the electric shield lets you skip a platform segment, but that's about it. The shields empower and are convenient, but rarely really vital. In fact, sometimes they're almost entirely pointless, like in Flying Battery Zone, where you get the electric shield for one bit to get a lot of rings, but after that first section, the rest of the stage takes place in claustrophobic corridors, so the double jump the electric shield contains is entirely useless. Even the one section that takes place outside has absolutely no part where the double jump is even remotely helpful. Now, play a game like Mario where power-ups have a much bigger impact. Well, sure, also plenty of moments where they're not super relevant, but there are more than a few moments where the difference between having, say, a frog suit or not are life and death. If you get a leaf or cape, you can bet there will be tricky platform sections. Getting a fire flower is usually immediately followed by tons of enemies. If a Mario game hands you a power-up, you can bet it will be instrumental for the upcoming sections, and not just a fun convenience. The further you go in the Mario series, the more power-ups are directly connected to the level design. And that's not even talking about games like Zelda or Luigi's Mansion, where every item or power-up you get is essential to your puzzle solving. In fact, often there are puzzles where you have to find entirely new twists and ways how you use the items. Sega also has a few games where power-ups are essential, but much more than with Nintendo games. They're just conveniences. You get a little extra time, can beat up opponents a little more convenient. Extra help, a feeling of empowerment, but rarely utterly important.
So what's the problem? That's awesome! Power-ups in these games aren't tasks or challenges, they're empowerment. They strengthen the core of the game instead of distracting from it. Yeah, Sega often employs power-ups and items that don't have a direct purpose, but just make you a little more powerful and let you earn more points. Which I like, it gives me freedom. Sonic is about freedom. When I get power-up as Sonic, I feel awesome. Ooh, more power, I'm extra strong. In a Zelda game, I'm paranoid and scared of items. And god damn, another puzzle's coming.
To me, they distract from the core energy of the game. Run around and hitting enemies in their stupid faces with my awesome sword. But oh damn, I walk into a room and see all the torches need to be lit and blocks to be pushed and here we go doing stupid junk again. With Sonic, getting a power never interrupts the core gameplay. I'm kicking ass, get extra powers, and I'm still kicking ass. Get the power up and I'll get some extra rings or die less from water. Awesome! Lose the power up, well, whatever, a little more difficult, but I can still kick butt. But play Yoshi's Island and there's the helicopter. Guess I have to be a stupid helicopter now. I'm playing Luigi's Mansion, fighting ghosts and having a good time, but oops, door's locked. Guess I have to vacuum clean every corner. And flash the light desperately in order to find whatever stupid thing the game wants me to do to progress. It stops the action.
But that's the point of these games, you imbecile! What's a Zelda game without puzzles? What's a horror game without exploration?
Right. We did put Nintendo's more puzzle games against Sega's more arcade games, so the comparison is a little unfair.
But they do give us a pure example of how their usual way of thinking works. Nintendo is very methodical. Everything has a very clear, specific purpose. With Mario, power-ups are carefully planned when you need them. Levels are very clear and strict. Here's where you are, here's the goal, here are the obstacles. Now you need to do these things, these specific things in order to get through it. Everything is set up very carefully. Sonic, on the other hand, is much more sloppy. Just a bunch of things happen. Woo, go here, woo, go there. I'm hit, whatever, lose some rings. I can get half of them back and whatever. Here's another bunch of rings. There's this segment here in the desert stage where you get an invincibility, and then there's absolutely no enemies or danger for a long time. So you think it's pointless until you discover all the way at the end of the track that you fall into a pit with spikes. So you're supposed to get there before your invincibility runs out. But you know what? I didn't even notice this, because even when I don't have invincibility, whatever, I'd lose some rings. Moving on. You're a tank, just knocking into things.
Very barbaric compared to Nintendo. The only messy Nintendo franchises I can think of are Star Fox and Smash Brothers. Those two are the least Nintendo-esque and have much more of the arcade mentality of Sega. Lots of sound effects and energy and chaos and adrenaline-pumping action. But outside of those two, Nintendo games are often very careful.
Yeah, really? Nintendo would never have a game where you're a taxi cab crashing into people and buildings for money and points.
Well, okay, there's Mario Kart and... Okay, there's a lot of overlapping then. And Sega has a few more methodical games like Nintendo has. Yeah, definitely a few Sega games that feel like a Nintendo game. Like this one, Comic Zone.
Not only with a quirky gimmick of being in a comic, Comic Zone is extremely methodical for a beat-em-up, which are usually very messy, just endless waves of thugs to punch. Where in Comic Zone you're constantly doing carefully set up set pieces and challenges. How do you get past this guy? Fight this specific guy by using this environment. Seriously, if Nintendo would ever make a beat-em-up, it'll be probably like this. Besides the violence and being cool and trendy. And
So, okay, overlapping. It's not black and white. But generally, when Nintendo and Sega are at their most pure, Sega's cool and messy and trendy, and Nintendo's atmospheric and methodical. Which is why Sonic Colors was such an enormous departure from classic Sonic. It's much more Nintendo-minded. Its power-ups are very specific challenges, specifically set up in order to get rewards. No longer are emblems or moonstones or red coins randomly scattered through the level. Now everything is a carefully calculated challenge. Here's Rocket Wisp, you have to do rocket thing to solve the next puzzle. Drill Wisp, there's a drill puzzle here.
which is why people more gravitating toward Nintendo games love that game, and I hate it. And power-ups aren't just cool, awesome things to make me feel empowered anymore. They're harbingers of puzzles and pace-interrupting challenges. No longer, yay, I have fire powers now! But, my exciting adventures put on hold again, because I have to do something stupid with the float wisp again.
The only Sonic games I remember with carefully planned power-ups is Sonic 2. Probably why it's the most popular amongst Nintendo friends from the classics. Play the game right, and you barely even see power-ups. They're all deliberately put in places where only if you suck at a game would appear. Deliberately planned to help newcomers, but out of the way for experts. Alright, and there's Sonic Advance 3 abusing its open levels for stupid Cheo hunts. That sucked. So yeah, I like optional freedom and power-ups. Just there for me to play with without having to worry about them. Sprawling and open environments for me to choose to which path I take with little consequence. Well, as long as it's actual inconsequential freedom and the open sections aren't a deliberate part of the challenge. At least give me a radar if I have to search for junk.
Speaking of Nintendo versus Sega, when you look at all Sega franchises, Sonic kinda stands out like a sore thumb. In marketing and status, he operates much more like a Nintendo character than a Sega character. Ironically, but unavoidable for a mascot. So right, Mario is Nintendo's big guy, but push him aside and Nintendo has tons of other big characters that work as secondary mascots. Kirby is all over the place, Pikachu is big, as in big in status, not like physically big. Link is very well known, but who would be Sega's Kirby or Pikachu? Any character not from the Sonic series that comes even close?
Well, there's Knights and Ulala and Somebody Migo.
Right. And in how many games have they starred? Not counting the racing games.
2, and 2.
Oh dear, not much of a big mascot if you only headline 2 games, are you? How many of Sega's so-called All-Stars had more than 2 games on their resume? There's only 2 Jet Set Radios, only 1 Ristar.
Well, you got Alex Kidd.
Who hasn't had a game in how many years now? Okay, 3 rules. A character who had more than 2 games, survived past 1 console generation, so by Streets of Rage, and wasn't replaced by a different main character in the sequel, so by Joe Musashi, BD, Joe, and Shion. How many are you left with?
Ai from Monkey Ball and Akira from Virtua Fighter. Do G and Kazuma Kiryu count? They do kind of get replaced as main characters, but they still show up in practically every game of their franchise.
Okay, so here's the deal. Nintendo puts a lot of effort making their characters equally important as their company. They're everywhere. They have at least 1 game on every console, occasionally skipping one, and even when companies are just experimenting and doing something weird, they still often push their characters in, like with Kirby's Epic Yarn and Star Fox Adventures and such. The characters are part of their family, so you see them everywhere. People fall in love with the characters and therefore stick with Nintendo. That's not how Sega operates. You watched that Disney movie, Wreck-It Ralph? Remember that arcade game, Candy Crush, that had this weird gimmick? Although there is a main character, it also boasted you can get a whole new main character every time you play. Now that's pretty much Sega's mindset when it comes to characters. Not brand recognition, but a constant drive to be cool. They constantly push their old characters out to replace them with new ones. Someone like Joe Musashi and isn't Sega's Link. He's just cool ninja in Ninja Game, and when they make a new Shinobi game a few years later, they're more than happy to throw Joe in the trash to replace him with cool other ninja. Look at the Crazy Taxi series where each new game has 4 entirely new characters, even though they all follow the exact same character tropes from the last.
Well, the old cast appears as bonus characters, but I see your point. Sega doesn't sell them as characters like a Mario, but as trends. Look at these awesome dudes!
Or heck, you mentioned G from House of the Dead before? In the first game you had G and Thomas, 2 generic white guys in suits. Then in House of the Dead 2, they're replaced by James and Gary, 2 other generic white guys in suits. That sure was worth the bother of redesigning them.
Well, later we got more varied characters and some old ones returned, but yeah.
See, Sega doesn't have this loyalty to its characters. Characters are merely cool gimmicks to sell their games on. It's amusing how many Sonic fans are insulted that Shadow and Silver shared Spotlight with him in 06. If Sonic shared the same fate as his fellow Sega All-Stars, he'd already been replaced by a speedy, even cooler Hedgehog.
Yeah. Poor Kiryu. Marketed as a main character in Yakuza 4, yet it takes over 10 hours of gameplay before you even unlock him, and then the game's almost over. Yeah. Sega doesn't seem to have a short attention span when it comes to their characters. And not just their characters, though. Sega has extremely little focus on their brand names to begin with. Unlike Nintendo, who's sure to plaster Mario's name on everything, Sega almost seems ashamed of itself and prefers to hide behind other brands like Daytona or NASCAR or Die Hard and such. I mean, so you have this arcade R-plane shooting game called Afterburner. Everyone loves it. Awesome game. And then another one, Afterburner 2, already. And then they improved the formula and make another one. Whoo! Afterburner 3? No, now it's called G-Lock. Okay, confusing. So then they make another one. Afterburner 3? Nope. G-Lock 2? Nope. Now it's called Strike Fighter. Okay. So a couple years later they make a new game. Same thing, arcade jet shooting enemies. Afterburner 3? Nope. G-Lock 2? No. Strike Fighter 2? No. Now it's called Sky Target. Like, what? Sega now has 4 entirely different franchises based around the exact same concept.
It's like Nintendo making another Star Fox game, but calling it Air Weasel or something.
Granted, there are slight differences between the 4 franchises. Some are fast and cartoonish, while others are slower and realistic. But Nintendo would have given them new names, at best just Afterburner subtitles something. And to be fair, they did return to the Afterburner name later on. Streets of Rage might be over, but every new console generation, Sega has a brand new X-Cops beat thugs up on the Street franchise to replace it with. And I freaking love the game on a Dreamcast called 18-Wheeler American Pro Trucker, which apparently had a sequel I had no idea about, but called King of Route 66. How was I supposed to know that was a sequel to the other game? It's a serious pain as a Sega fan to keep track of your franchises if it goes all over the place like this. Though this game actually sucks, so maybe it's good to name few people off. And James Rolfe is confused by Rambo or Legend of Zelda titles. Should be glad he's not a Sega fan. Sega's real messy. I remember when the Dreamcast died, I was completely confused as a Sega fan which console I should go afterwards, GameCube, Xbox, or PlayStation 2. I read an article that Sonic Team recommended everyone to buy a GameCube, so I went for that. And the GameCube did receive a few exclusives, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 Remastered and Skies of Arcadia Legends, but I already had those games on the Dreamcast. While the Xbox ended up having the actual follow-up Dreamcast games, getting the new Jet Set Radio and Toe Jam and Earl and Crazy Taxi.
But yeah, it fits with the company. As we said, Nintendo is calm, mature, and methodical, while Sega is rash, impulsive, and energetic. Doesn't matter who you prefer, who's better or worse. The point is that the two companies were night and day toward each other, and that's good. Means that you as a gamer had a genuine choice. In the end, Nintendo won from Sega, but not before Sega created tons of experiences Nintendo never could. From the stupid, impulsive, and gloriously fun and violent arcade games to dangerously ambitious world simulators.
Yeah, Sega versus Nintendo. If you ever wondered why Sonic fans can tolerate the bad games of Sonic, play more of Sega's stupid, dumb, and fun arcade games. They're not polished, not perfectly programmed, they're not carefully planned. It's just shameless, dumb fun, and that's what I like in my Sonic games. But yeah, Sonic himself was already a sore thumb for Sega, so in hindsight I shouldn't have been surprised Sonic is now badly emulating the Mario philosophy of game design.
Let's hope Sega can at least eventually crack Nintendo's game philosophy and make a Sonic game on par with a Mario game then, even if it's Mario Sunshine's quality.
Hey, I like Sunshine. Also, I think I've seen more than enough Mario Sonic already. I want a stupid Sonic game again. Yeah.
Kind of like Freedom Planet, which I've been playing on Steam recently, which is like a throwback to old Sonic games.
Ah, that game. Played the demo. Funny, despite talking through this video about how I want non-consequential freedom, I found the opening stage a little too open in that game, and it became boring. Go figure. It's all a balancing act. That's not a complaint about Freedom Planet though, that's an observation about myself. Second stage was much better, but I think we talked too much. Good night.
Well, it's late. We should sleep. See you, boys and girls.